Good afternoon, right? Yeah, it's afternoon. So what we're going to focus on today, or this afternoon, is the Hall of Fame series, the 12-inch series that came out in the 90s. Real quick story about this line from me personally is important just due to the fact that I was getting older. As Kirk said, I was getting into girls and all that stuff by this point. And my mom just, she wanted to get me something for Christmas. And so there's no, I moved on from Real American Hero, and she saw these 12-inch figures. And this is really, these figures actually are, kind of transitioned me from playing with G.I. Joe as a kid and then becoming more of a collector eventually. So for a long time, I collected the Hall of Fame and then even in the classic collection and stuff like that. Although now I'm mainly focused on a Real American Hero. But this is actually a panel that we had originally slotted for HasCon back in 2017, but we ran out of time. So I thought, what better time than to do it here? I know there's a big 12-inch focus here at this show. So I wanted to introduce these guys real quick and then let Kurt Groen kind of kick it off. But next to me have Greg, Kirk again, Vinny, and Kurt. I'll let them introduce themselves and their roles. And go ahead, take it away, Kurt.
So you're seeing a blue screen here because I did leave one part of the story out, and Vinny was such a huge part of it along with Greg that I'll let Vinny tell the story about how they met with Target to get this process rolling.
Oh, so you want me to start?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
First.
So I joined Hasbro in 1989, and I got moved on to G.I. Joe in 1990. During that 89 to 1990 period, I had seen the design team present this concept several times, and every time it got shot down by our management, especially our president, Larry Bernstein. And his claim was, look, Joe is not doing well right now. We had to cut the programming cost, and this is not a time to get distracted with something else. And the whole premise was to do a 12-inch version of Duke. So I thought that this was a brilliant concept, and I thought that it could be successful if it was marketed to dads in the right way. And so I went back at this, and we had another line review, and we had the model set up, and the lights were brought down low, and we came out and presented it, and we had American flags floating in the video screen, and we had the Halls of Montezuma playing in the background really low. And it was fantastic. Probably one of the best presentations I did. And then I got shot down again. And I got shot down 6 more times in the process of like 6 months. And so one day, at the end of the 7th time, I went to go see our president, because I was getting aggravated over it. And he said, listen, Vinny, I love you, but you just put your head down and you drive forward. And I said, yeah. I said, and what's the problem with that? He goes, well, you're not seeing the forest for the trees. Like, we need the 3 3/4-inch G.I. Joe line to do well, and this isn't going to help it. And I said, I disagree. I said, I think that you bring dads into the brand with the form that they remember playing with their kids, and every parent wants to repeat the best of their childhood with their children, okay? And it happens all the time. That's why some of these toy brands never go away. So he goes, listen, we're not doing it. I'm like, okay. So the next day, we have Target coming in. So we're sitting in a conference room. It's got a U-shaped table in it. And we're going through all the boys' toys. And, Kirk was there, Dave was there, Greg was there, and Kurt was there too. And, we're presenting the line. And we're in this smaller building on Hasbro's campus. The design team is in another building. So we're going through it, and at the end of the presentation, the buyer, his name is Mark Pritchard, brings up, hey, have you thought about, redoing the original 12-inch G.I. Joe? So my leg starts going up and down like this, right? And Larry is sitting across from me, and he looks at me and he goes, Vinny, he goes, for God's sake, he goes, before you pee your pants, why don't you tell him what you've been bothering me about for 6 months? So I start the spiel, and between Kurt and Greg, they telegraph to the other building, we need the model over here. So I'm going through stalling, and eventually the unit comes over, and Greg's brings it out, and then we start to talk about it with Target right there. And we agreed, all of us, including Larry, we were going to do Duke and Desert Camo and Cobra Commander. So we had to, off and running, so we had to use an existing body to get there. So it was the torso.
We're gonna hold it. We're gonna hold it. I'm gonna stop. So I'm gonna take over a little bit here. So when Vinny said we need this figure, I popped up, and what you see behind, what Vinny's gonna see for the first time behind him, is that he said, "Can you do this?" And I got out of a chair so fast and went down to Wayne Luther's office. And yes, Vinny talked like a 1930s gangster. So I ran down the hallway, and dude, I was flying and ran into Wayne Luther's office. I have no idea to this day if he was in there having a meeting or anything. I grabbed the figure, came flying back, and presented it like this. And Vinny was very apprehensive. He was very nervous because he's had been shot down so many times. When I'm going to stop it right here is that you get the understanding Vinny was the champion of this. So he's got all of us supporting. We were the support cast. We're standing right behind him. And you always hear the joke, we're behind you in case things go wrong, but if we leave, we're going to lead the way out. No. Vinny knew we were behind him 100%. We weren't falling backwards. And so what you're going to see through this presentation, and everybody's going to talk about, is what it took to get this line to bear. So I'll start here with Dave Kunitz. He was one of the ones who created this figure, which is who Vinny showed to Target. So Dave, you and Kirk came up with this.
Well, Greg asked us to look into 12-inch. And, Kirk did all this sculpture. It was actually a fully articulated, amazing articulation, a lot of great detail on the body. The clothing was done by the Soft Group, by Alana Klingensmith. The knife that you see on in the sheath is actually aluminum with a wooden handle that I made because I wanted to, but it looked really cool. And we had found a gun to go with it, probably an old G.I. Joe gun from the ancient days. But yeah, we wanted this pitch. We wanted to do it, and we were shot down a bunch of times. So that's why I was sitting in the VP's office, just sitting on a wall.
So you have to understand that, yes, it was presented a number of times, and when G.I. Joe was selling well, the reasoning was that, well, we don't want to dilute the brand by introducing another size. When G.I. Joe wasn't selling well, they would say, well, we really need to focus on the 3 3/4 inch. So, fabricate a reason for whatever situation. We're just not going to do it.
So we're going to take you into the figure and some of the mechanisms behind it. I'll let Greg and Kirk take it from here because there was reasons we did everything.
As Kurt touched on, we used the body from Girls' Toys line. Was it Gem?
Maxi.
Maxi.
It was both, actually, because
Yeah.
we used the same body for Maxi as we did for Gem.
The only thing we did was resculpt the head in the shape of Duke, and we changed out the hands because it had to have the grip that could hold a weapon. Then there was the idea of having the weapon that could have sound and light in it. So we had to fabricate that would go with the figure as well as the accessories, the helmet, the knife, and all that.
Because one of the things Kirk had said is it has to be a toy, and that resonated big time.
Yeah, if you were here earlier, this was the era of toyizing the line, and so when Vinny came to me with the idea of doing this, I'd been supporting it from day one. Mm-hmm. But when he finally came to me and said, hey, I think we got to go, I said, great, but it's got to have a toy feature. And at the time, we were playing around with Sonic Fighters and looking at talking G.I. Joes. I said, it's got to have a toy feature. I know you want to go after adult collectors with this, but we can certainly go get the adult collector, but we can maximize sales by even bringing kids into it if it's got a toy feature. And so that was the idea behind the Target Duke with that gigantic, M16.
Yeah.
But that was my only contribution to this. These
No,
guys, these guys did.
He came up with the name Hall of Fame after we did the first one. That was Kirk's contribution to this.
So
Many other things.
as you go through we had to get the accessories, and we had to build this killer model. Alana Klingensmith was in the soft goods side, and I got to work with her on this, and she was ecstatic because she was doing something other than a girl's toy. And she told me, don't go crazy on the details and size of the drawing. Just give me what you want to look like. So these were really fast, really done. I actually was sitting with her drawing these. And then she would tell me yes, yes, no, no. And then based on that, she created the model uniform that we were going to present. The other thing, though, is that camo pattern. There were no computers back then. That had to be hand-drawn. So every part of this process, there were a lot of people involved in it. The weapon, as Vinny pointed out, is very large, but think today, if you had that same chip you were going to put in this gun, it'd be really tiny and in one battery. Back then, we were limited on what we had. Just a quick look at some of the drawings. Some of the things, too, is like the boots we had to redraw because I'm learning what rotomolding is all about, and so how it pours out of the mold, and a lot of parts had to be redrawn a couple of times to get it, just right.
If you're not familiar with a rotomolding process, what that is, as opposed to injection molding, where you have two pieces of steel come together and you squirt plastic inside, rotomolding is more of an art than it is a science. So you have this vessel, basically, that has a cavity, and then you have a sloppy mix that goes in there, and then it's rotated around amongst different axes and whatnot. When the solution hardens, then it comes out. The problem is that each time you do that, it shrinks by a percentage, so that you actually have to make your prototype larger so that when it shrinks, it fits what you need it to fit. And that, like I say, is more art than science.
The other part of it too is, like they said, once you turn it over, if there's water in it, it all has to be able to pull out because you're pulling the rubber out of the mold. So you can't have any deep nooks or crannies, otherwise the tips or points are going to rip off and you just destroyed your product.
And if you stop at my table, you'll see I have a casting of the Duke head, and then also you'll see Tom Hanks, the Saving Private Ryan that never was released, and you'll see a bigger head to what you guys are saying to kind of prove that point.
I think the percentage is like 8 or 9%.
Ultimately, it comes to 9%
Right.
because they do it in different steps, but I think it's 3% each time
Yeah,
you do it.
three stages altogether. It's crazy. Now the body, in this case, the original, we just did the arms, but later we did the entire body, and this was where Ken Ellis's team became involved. Ken was a gruff, harsh man on me. I love him to death because he taught me more about sculpting and how the sculpting works. But so his team now takes over, and we've got to approve what they've done. So again, you've got another team taking this deeper, along with the engineers who are working on it too.
Mind you, this is being done at light speed.
Yeah, it is. So like the head had to be sculpted, and that was the final head for the Target Duke. And you can see, the arms, to your point, Vinny, you had the arms that turned, you had to have the kung fu grip. So you had to have a fully articulated figure that the kid could play with. And then this was the final figure.
What, do I work for Maytag?
What?
It looks like I work for Maytag.
Yeah, just Cobra. Now the thing I'm going to bring up with Kirk and Vinny on this is, one, who did the operations manual?
Copywriting did.
Copyright.
So did you guys use the old G.I. Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The original?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, I wasn't involved with that. And then the packaging. Who decided on the look, the feel?
Phil Arndt and Harry
Probably, yeah.
worked on
Yeah.
that, and we specifically showed a different look than what we did for GI Joe. I mean, for the rest of the GI Joe line to make sure it stood out.
Can you talk into your?
Talk into the mic.
Oh, yeah, they can hear.
So sorry, I haven't seen this deck before. We used our art department, Phil Arndt and Harry Heen, put together this packaging design. Specifically, we wanted something that was different than the rest of the line, but used some of the icons that were there. And Kurt came up with the term Hall of Fame, because otherwise it would have just been 12-inch Duke. And that stuck the whole time that we did it.
So then we worked on the next year's line in 92.
Well, explain why we all of a sudden went to 4. What happened
Yeah,
with?
okay,
all the-
so-
Him go.
All right, so, yes.
Who made those drawings?
I did some of them, and
Like, these drawings look like sort of anime to me.
Yeah, in a little way they are.
a little bit. I'm a comic book artist, and
So
So-
this whole exercise took, I think we had less than 9 months to do it. Usually we have a year and a half. So we're racing to get all this done, and then I'm going on to a commercial shoot in Vancouver for 3 weeks. So, and I kind of forgot it was Father's Day because that's when Target was going to launch this. So they had a full-page circular, when they did circulars, that came out on Father's Day. So I'm up there, and I forget about this. And then a couple of days later, I get a phone call from one of my associates, I'll say just that nicely, and I will not name them, calls me up and says, Vinny, don't answer the phone. This abomination of yours is stuck to the shelf at Target. They want markdown money right away, and Larry is looking for your head. So I'm gullible. So I'm like, oh, crap. Okay. So the phone starts ringing, and for 4 days, I won't answer the phone or take a call. Okay, and this is before cell phones. So finally, our salesman, who is located in Minneapolis to be next to Target, gets a hold of somebody to tell me that, he has to talk to me. So I pick up the phone. I'm like, Bill, I am so sorry. I don't know what happened. I was so sure of this. The product came out really great. I don't even know what to say. And he said, well, what did you hear? And I said,
What are you
that it
talking
was
about?
a huge failure and that Target's looking for markdown money. He goes, who did you listen to? And I told him. He goes, don't listen to them. Because, Vinny, we had a shipment of 20,000 units, and then we were scheduled to do another 20,000 for the fall. So one in June and one in September. He goes, we sold through the 20,000 in 3 hours. We had over 100,000 rain checks that Target had to give out, and they don't give out rain checks. He goes, Target's already agreed to air freight in the next 20,000 units on their dime to meet this demand. So I was just shocked at this entire thing. So we go back, and everybody's excited about it. And again, I was young and naive, so I had ordered a master carton of 6 of these, right? And I gave them out to the CEO, the CFO, the president, a couple of other ones, and it's just because I was proud of it, and I wanted them to know it came out. It came out so great. So we have another line review, like a month or so later. And we had already been working on what the next year was going to be, where we had to scramble because we needed more characters. Obviously, this had bigger legs than we thought. So we're scrambling to do all that, and we finally get to the line review. And G.I. Joe was always last. And at the end of that, we show Hall of Fame for the first time to Alan Hassenfeld. And the whole meeting, when we got to G.I. Joe, he is sitting there with his arms crossed, with this glowering look on his face, and he's just burning laser beams into my body, okay? And we get done with the whole thing, and he doesn't clap or anything else. Everybody else did. And they were starting to file out of this meeting room. And he said, Vinny, you hang in there. Kirk, you hang back too. So the two of us are in there, and then he starts. He goes, this is the worst looking product I've ever seen. This is an embarrassment to G.I. Joe. Where, how did this come to be? Why wasn't I informed about this? Who did the packaging? Who did the sound? We can't hear the item in that whole thing. On and on and on. And Kirk tried to step in and save me, and he said to Kirk, sit down, just sit down. So we finally gets done yelling at us. We go across the street, because after every line review, where you think you're getting direction, on what to do, it really isn't that. There's another meeting where you decide what
Where
you're
you
really
get the
going to do.
real direction.
And so we're in Kirk's office, and there's me and the other marketing people on the other Boys Toys brands, and Larry comes in, he barges in, is looking around the room, and he's like, "You." So I'm like, "Oh God." So I go outside, and he left the door open, and he says, "That idiot," and he didn't use the word idiot, "that idiot is not fit to tie your shoes. You and Greg are merchants. That was brilliant what you did. We're going to do a lot more of it, and the issue is with him, not you guys. But we're having a meeting tomorrow at 9 o'clock in his office, and so you better be there." So we get dragged in, and there's myself and Kirk and Steve DeGuano, who's the head of design, Greg and Kunitz. I don't know if we dragged you into that or not, but it got into this whole thing where first he apologized, and then he insisted that he was going to be involved in all the products going forward because he had this emotional connection to G.I. Joe, because when he was growing up, he lived in Hong Kong, which is where manufacturing was done, and working on G.I. Joe, making sure it went into production and all the accessories that went with it and all the rest of it, that was his baby. Now, here I am, I'm sweating this because nobody knows, and I don't think Kirk knows until now, that when we were doing the packaging, I wanted a photograph of an old G.I. Joe and a new G.I. Joe. And Hasbro has a terrible, archival system, so there was none. So, and we didn't have any money to go buy anything, so I knew Alan had a case in his office of his father's 4 G.I. Joes posed on a stand. So I talked to his secretary, and I got in there with the photographer, and we took the case off, and then we took the figures out, and we took pictures of them. I said, might as well just take pictures of all of them. And then we put it back on there. And I was so worried that he found out that I did that, that he was going to fire me. And after that, it just started to develop, kind of on its own. And it's the thing that helped to certainly add revenue to G.I. Joe at the time, but also the 3 3/4 inch line increased as well, because it brought dads in to the concept the way that we thought it would happen. And that was just a ride on its own. The next year, I think we did $30 million in 12-inch G.I. Joe. So, back over to you.
So like Vinny said, then we have 4 new figures. So logical was Duke. I don't know where the decision came from to make his head the 30th anniversary.
Oh, that was an edict from Alan that G.I. Joe should look as much like the original figure, so kind of a nondescript face, and because he accused us of the Duke face looking like a gorilla.
He said he looked too mean, is
Yeah,
one of the
too
things
mean.
he said.
Yeah.
Why am I surprised after we had to change the killer whale to a dolphin?
There you go.
So we came up with Duke, Stalker, Snake Eyes, and Cobra Commander. Those are the logical first 4. And I'll tell you a little story about this. Vinny and I went to California to a convention to show this for the first time to the fans. And we sat in the basement. They had us in a room a little bit smaller than this. And somebody walked in, saw the Snake Eyes, and just started ragging on it, saying this was the worst character I'd ever seen. Him and his buddy were just blasting us, and everybody's quiet. And I'm thinking, man, nobody wants this. This is a terrible idea. We get the conversation to move on a little bit, and another guy comes in and starts talking about Snake Eyes. Vinny turns his back, walks away, because I can just see him turning red. He doesn't want to go through this again. My heart's sinking, and the guy goes, "This is the best one I've seen." And the whole crowd agreed with him. And we realized people actually liked the figure more than we were thinking right at that moment. So I'm very happy about that one. But it was a lot of fun. You can see the face of Snake Eyes with the scar. Cobra Commander, we did not, obviously we don't want to show his face at all. So that was where the mask came in. Oops. And then we followed it up with the two basic figures to give, again, the simple box, the simple play. I don't know who came up with who led this direction on this one.
We needed a lower price point for Walmart.
We were trying to broaden the
Yeah.
line.
So Walmart, you got to meet what the retailers want, and here we go.
Yeah.
And we wanted to start selling basic figures
Talking your mind.
and more accessories, and eventually vehicles.
So it was the, return to the Barbie strategy, the razor blade strategy, the original G.I. Joe strategy of giving a very basic figure in a box, and then you bought all the accessories to, build it up. I was just calculating, looking up Vinny said we did $30 million, and that sounds like a lot. And then I said, well, what would $30 million be in today's dollars? And it's like $72 million.
Wow.
And, that's a pretty big brand to have, as part of your portfolio, so.
But in today's world, that would be considered a failure. Isn't 100 million
Nah.
the break point?
That's what they were looking for
Yeah.
G.I.
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah.
But remember, it was only a segment.
That's right.
True.
So.
Pretty cool. So then we went into '93 with the new figures, and as you see up here, one of the things that was really cool on my part is I got to talk to the Marine Corps and get a hold of their quartermaster on a Gung Ho, and I was asking about the color of the jacket, and they keep giving you a PMS color that's blue, and that's not blue, it's black, and so finally the quartermaster calls me back and he said, I can tell you this, it's so blue that it's black. And they gave me a PMS color of blue, and they gave me another chip color that they claimed was just the dye that was added. They wouldn't say it's black, but it's black. So Gung Ho, yeah, that was one of the more fun ones because I did start talking to the Marines, which would help me in the future. The Storm Shadow figure with that pattern on it, that was really difficult. Again, no computer, so this is all hand-drawn. And you've got to make sure it wraps properly. You have to make sure it's able to print. And unlike a step and repeat, that was a custom print just for him. Let's see which one. Oops.
Now, what about, because Gung Ho had a silver sword and gold, right?
He had a
Were there
silver
some running
He had a
changes?
silver pistol, the chrome-plated sword, and a chrome-plated knife. So the idea was that he was more dressed. It was more an updated look.
I think there's a variant of him and Rock and Roll, I believe. I'm trying to think of the variant. Does anybody remember what the variant was on Rock and Roll?
Yeah, green shirt.
Green shirt, okay.
Green shirt versus tan.
Okay. Is that a running change? Do you guys remember any of that?
No.
That's all right. Just
But I
figured.
will bring up a figure that, if done today, would have been a lot different. But this was the electronic Duke, and I'm going to let Greg talk about this one.
This one came about as a result of an inventor showing us an emulator, which is basically like a concept model. And what this inventor did is he took a sentence, and each sentence has a noun, a verb, prepositions, and whatever else is in a sentence. I mean, I'm not an English major. But he broke them down into columns, and in each column, there would be a bunch of nouns, then a bunch of verbs, a bunch of adjectives, and so on. So they were, I forget how many, 5 or 6 of these columns, lack of a better word. And what the emulator would do, or the little computer chip would do, is pick a word at random from each of the columns. The result is that you would get a sentence. And the sentence was purely random. So you push the button, and there would be a bunch of words, and it could be like an example of pop smoke on that bunker. And however many words, that's what it decided. The interesting thing is that the number of permutations that you could do, I think I calculated at one time it was over 1 million possibilities. Now, I presented that to marketing, and they said, there's no way it can be that many. We can't say that.
We're not good at math.
So the net result was that they said, well, how about 100,000? And I said, yeah, it'll certainly do that, but far more. but that's what they felt they would be comfortable so that there wouldn't be armies of lawyers knocking on the door saying, you guys, you know.
I was just going to say, marketing's not good at math, and lawyers are even worse.
Yeah.
So,
But in any event, Vinny and I spent, that was another trip to California to this little recording studio in
Yeah,
some guy's
house.
where we had a voice actor basically read a whole bunch of words. And it had to sound like it would come from Duke. And it may sound a little disjointed when it's done, you know, as it's done, and today would be very different. And of course, the emulator, we had to have engineering do a buck so that we knew how much space was needed, which of course today would probably be about this big. But all that got stuffed into this little magic box. So today I call it, it's FM. It's freaking magic. That's how it's done. But that's how Duke came about, and it was a nice feature for its time.
And that fall, there was some kind of advocate group that switched G.I. Joe and Barbie's voice boxes in there to comment about how it was gender specific, and that G.I. Joe could talk like Barbie and Barbie could talk like G.I. Joe. So marketing has to deal with all that stuff. We always have to deal with the legal stuff. R&D never has to deal with that stuff.
Never.
Never.
No invite ever to a USA show.
Now, did anybody ever see this figure?
Yes.
Yeah, you know how it talked then. Duke, get that hill. You know, the inflections were so good.
It's dated now on technology.
yes.
It
Oh,
was really advanced for the time.
It was
Exactly.
clever.
It was
Yep.
clever, but now the voice, the automated voice is so much better now.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I still have a working one.
Oh,
Do you really?
That's
Which, of course,
top quality.
you know, back in the original was the pull string and a little record.
Yep.
So we went into accessories, and this actually got to be a lot of fun. The idea was to do, you know, land, sea, air, and water, or I should say snow. But again, it had to be fun. It had to be play. And the snow one is my favorite on this, because you could actually push him down a hill and he would actually ski, so it worked. But at the same time, you know, you had to make sure everything fit on the characters. This was all new tooling, so instead of taking tools from other parts, everything we were doing on the 12-inch was new. So every item for the first couple of years was brand new, no changes. That was a good line. And then Dave got to do his Jeep.
That's impressive.
It was a lot of fun to do. Originally, there's a box in the front. It had working lights. Mine does. You could do it too. Yeah, so that's why it's a separate piece and it's got some depth to it. But yeah, it would fit lights if you choose to put those in it. We had a lot of fun. We had this little robot that would deliver mail. And of course, somebody had to attach my vehicle to the back of that.
Bill Young did it.
So it was pulled along. But yeah, the Rhino was fun. And then the lock and load mechanism, I worked out where you could actually do a sort of a lock and load with that missile and make it a little bit more almost realistic. So that was a good time too. The tires and wheels came from a different vehicle, I think a Tonka vehicle.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, Rhino. That was fun to work on and big.
Dave, do you recall the retail on that?
I don't. I think it was like only $30 or something like that at the time.
That was,
Okay, so
I
30,
picked
I
up
thought it
all
was
my
40.
nephews.
Yeah,
So it was 30-something bucks, I think.
yeah.
Eventually on sale for 20, you know.
Of course, at Target after Christmas.
And it rolled great. I found a picture from when I was living in Seattle, and my son is actually playing with this, and I thought that was so cool.
And I can tell you a 3-year-old can actually ride on that.
Yeah. I saw somebody using it as skates at one point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what are you doing? Oh, okay.
But this is some of the ideas that did not come to life. And we had some pretty cool ones. The Big Ben, he would have come with the inflatable raft. The idea being that, we taking from 3 3/4 inch and, promoting him up.
His face was too ugly, right?
Thank you.
Curtis Big Ben.
And then we actually proposed Indiana Jones. Obviously, that you're starting to get into licenses. It's not that simple, and that really didn't go too far. But the Deep Six, the idea was to give him metal boots or steel boots, put him and you could put him in a pool. It would drop down. You pump air into it, and it was supposed to inflate his vest, and he would come back up. Didn't quite work the way I hoped it would, because that thing had to be 6 feet long, 8 feet long, and to pump air into it really didn't work that well. So I'll take the hit on that one for not a really good idea. But these were some of the ideas, places we were looking to take the Hall of Fame line. We did look at the outer space. Outer space is a great place to go, fun to play. The problem with it, obviously, again, just it didn't cost out, and then I know the Apollo 13, we did come out with one, but this is the original idea here, where we actually were making it based on the movie. It was going to be the actual uniform they would wear. So I know it came out later with that strange helmet and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was from my group, the new group. I was not involved in that.
I was.
So the next line with, obviously Snake Eyes, but the one that was really good was I enlarged the countdown mechanism where you'd pull it and he'd climb up the string on Major Blood. And that's where, again, we're still trying to be toys. We're still trying to have a lot of fun. And then we had Duke and Roadblock to support the line.
Took the shirts off because it was cheaper not to make a shirt.
And then Dave did the motorcycle.
Yeah, it did the strike cycle. One of the features that people, I guess, never really played with that much is it could be towed by the Rhino, but also that handle that could tow it, it would flick and go. So you could flick that motorcycle and it would shoot. It would go a good distance. Never really advertised, but yeah, it was a feature that just was extra.
Now, I got to ask, because when I went online to find photos of this thing, did anybody ever put the handlebars on it? Every sample I see doesn't have handlebars.
Yeah. But it was fragile there. The handlebars were the most fragile piece I thought. But I ended up with one at one point.
The clip on a lot of them
Yeah.
has broken over.
I blame engineering.
But it did
They're not here to defend themselves.
As you said, it had an attachment for the Rhino so that it could be towed.
Yeah.
So there was another vehicle that didn't make it in the line. It was a thing that would fly, the Thunderwing.
I thought that did make it.
No, it was only sold, I found out later, it was only sold internally.
Oh, well.
We had an RC tank for a little bit that we were pitching, but that didn't get too far. It was expensive.
No, I found the Thunderwing. Is that from England?
Maybe, because England was developing their own,
They had Action Man going
yeah,
on.
Action Man, so they were developing
I saw
along
that.
with us
Yeah.
some things. In fact, they had I have it, they have a stealth fighter jet that they did. You have it? Yeah,
That's a little
and
later.
shot foam darts.
Shot farm dogs.
Yeah.
And the little weird small truck that the guy has to lay on and shoot.
Yes, shoots out the front. Yeah, I have that.
That's a question I have. How did this line up with the Action Man? Because I see an awful lot of reuse. They used the
Yeah.
Rhino as well, and later, even in the US, it was being branded as, and I remember buying a G.I. Joe one from one of my nephews on sale, and it had the Action Man one in it.
Yeah.
Because the Action Man one was almost identical, except
Yeah.
instead of on the back printed G.I. Joe, it said Action Man. But it came in the G.I. Joe box.
I had made a number of trips over the pond to meet with those folks because they were looking at more articulation for their figure than what we were putting in ours.
And that's what I was gonna ask, is that next generation, their figure had it was the fully articulated version,
Yeah.
same body style, same
Yep.
hands,
Yep.
but a more playful figure.
They were looking at the ankles, especially posable feet. that comes to mind, and as well as the hands. And so there was a lot of back and forth on that because they were developing it for their markets, but because we had our division in the UK, they were trying to tie into our tooling as well, and we were trying to see if maybe we could make use of what they were doing.
Yeah, they had embraced the 12-inch figure much more enthusiastically than
Yeah.
in the U.S. And I think that's because of their history with Action Man. You know, they were selling 3 3/4 inch almost simultaneously with us early on, but when they saw the 12-inch, they really got enthusiastic about it because of the heritage it has throughout Europe. So their R&D group, you know, was tasked with coming up with a lot of great, and they did come up with a lot of great ideas. Unfortunately, you know, those ideas came after we were all dispersed
Yeah.
to other areas. So that's why a lot of what they had done for Europe for 95, 96, 97, it never came to the United States because the group now handling G.I. Joe ignored it all.
And then Mattel knocked us off with Max Steel
Right.
and did that show for a while.
Yeah, they had the TV
Which
show.
I had a
Yeah.
hand in developing.
Well, going to Kirk's point though, is when Action Man took off, and when I moved to Cincinnati, we were talking to them, and Vinny probably was too a little bit. Were you guys in Timeless? Talking to them?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we couldn't get management to buy into that type of play. We wanted play, and our management would just not let me go down. When I do Classic Collection tomorrow, I talk about that. It was beyond frustrating because they had a box thinking, and I was so used to somebody else running with ideas sometimes.
I had some travel, I was working and flying to Europe periodically, and I would go to the toy stores in Europe in the 90s, and there was all their new Action Man stuff with the 12-inch, and their assortment of vehicles was quite impressive. They made call it the truck, the big orange truck that turned into a command center.
Oh, yeah.
It was reminiscent of the mobile, the adventure.
Yeah.
vehicle.
Right,
Yes.
right.
And I remember, you know, having it shipped to the US, it basically cost me as much to ship it as it was to buy it. But I couldn't bring it on plane with me, you know, back, but it's quite impressive. And you don't see very many of those around, but they were really proud of their.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They
That
also-
thing was gorgeous.
They also embraced licenses. I have a James Bond.
Yep.
They did a couple of versions of James Bond, and I have a couple of those from Europe,
Is that the
from
one with the
UK.
film reel in it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
thing is so cool.
Yep.
I can talk a little bit about the articulation that we had done versus theirs. We had actually we wanted to get rid of the big joints. And we had this doll, it was called the Jenny doll. It was from Japan. Beautifully done doll. And it had incredibly flexible arms that you could actually see it ripple when it made a fist like this. And that's what we had started out with for our materials. We were told that it was too soft, that, you know, it could be ripped, and that was a problem. So the material was changed on us. So it really stopped some of the articulation that we really thought we could have.
Y'all improved, y'all did, like, the Hall of Fame advanced, like, you know, what they did at Target. They made Target did those whole World War II things with a more advanced Hall of Fame body, but it had the articulated feet
It
and
was
hands.
21st century, right?
That only
maybe.
lasted a couple of years or so, then the Action Man stuff was the next level. I found over years, they hold up really well.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't seem to break down in heat or anything. But
Yeah.
it seems like an underappreciated design.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The 30th anniversary used the Hall of Fame body, right?
Not doing the
Just original
60s,
heads.
70s articulation. Well, I guess what was the thought process behind that?
Well, the technology had improved that you could do stuff without having things
Because
sticking
it
out.
was 60s and 70s technology.
Yeah, it was old.
It was old.
So we thought we could do it better. Turned out that by the time we were launching it, it didn't do as much as we had hoped or thought, based on the plastics that we ended up having to use. Question in the back.
Just to follow on to that same kind of thinking, you mentioned earlier that everything you did was new tooling. for the most part, was new tooling? Is that because the old tooling wasn't available? I know that sometimes those assets.
Oh,
Wasn't any.
so
Tooling wasn't available.
you're talking about, 70s to, the 90s. It's 20 years. Hasbro only holds on to tooling for about 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
And then, because it costs so much money to store it, because they don't have a place to put it. And so Hasbro's a global company, so it will move tooling around the world as long as some region can do it. That's why you see a lot of G.I. Joe products end up in India. That's usually the last place where it goes. But, yeah, that tooling from the 60s and 70s, we wish we had it. But then, typical was that Alan's got this thing for, G.I. Joe, and Don Levine, who we resurrected for, the 30th anniversary, he wanted to write a book. And as part of writing the book, he wanted to recreate the original 12-inch figure. And it did very well. And then Kirk left Hasbro and joined Don, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, my first project after I decided to leave Hasbro and go off on my own was to work with Don on a project, and eventually that led to a partnership that he and I had. And my first job was to, quote, be the product manager on the original G.I. Joe, which was his dream of recreating the 12-inch. And he wrote a book with John Micklig, which is the Masterpiece Edition. In fact, I saw one out on the floor a little while ago. And the hook there was John, who was the brainchild behind it, had come to Don to say, I want to write a book about the origins of G.I. Joe, but I can't just write a book. I want to also include an actual original figure. Does Hasbro have the tooling? Could you get it for me? And Don actually, as Vinny said, approached Hasbro to say, do you have the tooling? And because we'll recreate the tooling. And they said, no, it's gone. So Don, out of his own pocket, spent the money on developing the tooling, of reproducing the tooling of the original 1964 body and head. And I worked with a sculptor who was part of Hasbro at the time. Well, he wasn't part of Hasbro at the time. He started his own sculpting company, Dave O'Connell, and Dave was a preschool and did some work on G.I. Joe. He sculpted the head, and again, I worked on the outside now as the product manager on that, developing that 12-inch figure. Don now owned the tooling. Hasbro had no involvement in the tooling any longer. And we maximized that tooling ourselves in creating our line of real heroes, which we sold to FDNY and NYPD. And somebody who helped us develop that is sitting in the audience, Robert DeCastro, who was a big resource of ours, who we just discovered. I don't even remember how we discovered you.
One of my clients that I did custom outfit for used it on a G.I. Joe show, and you guys saw it, and you wanted to have him give you my contact information.
And so Robert did a lot of the development work for us. And so there's a kind of like a genealogy there of, the original G.I. Joe, Hasbro Hall of Fame, back to the original G.I. Joe, and now to a new Real Heroes line that, we sold. It was first sold to Ertl as a $100 collectible, and then we started selling it to the FDNY gift shop and NYPD gift shops, and we ended up selling it as exclusives to Target on our own. We went to Hasbro, this is how, we went to Hasbro right after 9/11 because we had established a relationship with FDNY and NYPD. And literally a week after 9/11, the head of FDNY contacted us, and Don and I, and said, is there a way for you to take the items that are in our gift shops and go mass market with them and help contribute to, certain funds that they had set up? So we approached Hasbro, and we said, look, we've got all the tooling, but everything's done. You could sell this within months. 3 months is what we estimated. Just come up with a new package, make donations, portion of the proceeds to go to the FDNY. I forget the charity now. And they passed on it. They literally just said, no, we're not interested. So we took it to Target. Yeah, we took it to Target. At the end of 6 months, we made a donation of over $1 million to the FDNY charities. That's how brain dead they became, in terms of not like wanting to do things differently.
Now, was that the timeless stuff too? Or was that?
No.
No, that was what we did with Timeless is we approached Vinny, okay, because Vinny was now in a different division, and Don and I approached Vinny with different ideas for the Timeless, what became the Timeless collection.
Yeah. So it was, again, Alan got involved first, because Don was smart enough to know if he didn't go to Alan first, I was going to end up there anyway. And then we started, the division that it was in handled a lot of the direct import product that we did for all the brands. But we also started to develop exclusives for all the brands. And so it just seems like 5 minutes after I left the toy division and went to the direct import division, I was on G.I. Joe again. It was longer than that, but that's what it feels like. And here I am, dealing with, Kirk has always been a pleasure to deal with. Don, half the time. And, he could be very aggressive. And so, we started to brainstorm, but, what we started to do was basically make a list of all the famous products from the 60s and 70s, and then try to do versions of them that would not ruin the original ones. So that's why we did the astronaut in different colors. That's why we did the deep sea diver with real die-cast, pieces. And we did the marine that had die-cast, and we did a whole bunch of them. And that was a lot of fun. We had another guy that came to work with us, Lee McLaughlin, who was a consummate G.I. Joe collector like all of you, always wanted to be in the toy industry, came to Hasbro first working for the interactive group, which, just hold on to how old this is, which handled all the CD-ROM games of that. And then there was an opening in our group in the Hasbro Direct Division. We brought him on board, and he did great with that stuff, And he talked to some of you, including Ace, who's out there, to buy parts, because we didn't have any, to replicate and do those things. And I'll tell you, the factory did a great job in replicating them, but we always were very clear to do it in a different configuration so that, we can, and we did them for FAO and for Target and for certainly a bunch for Toys R Us, as well.
Yeah, and FAO was like, even on the Hall of Fame, was a big, supporter, because we did the Commando with the raft, and that was actually an Action Man raft. But it didn't work in the U.S. It didn't meet the standards, and they had us re-engineer the motor on it so that it would work in the U.S. That's the only Hall of Fame figure I still have to this day.
Because it had to put some kind of special protector around the propeller or something.
Around the propeller, plus we had to, the way they sealed in the batteries really was not the best way to do it. So we had to build a hole so they could do the rubber seal. There was a lot of steps that went into that one to get it to the market. But FAL Schwartz was such a great supporter of it.
They really always had a nice special figure.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
Yeah, we're happy to do it for him.
And they wanted one more, and I wasn't allowed to. We weren't going to go down that path because we were then turning into classic collection.
Yeah.
And we don't know why we couldn't do one more Hall of Fame. Who cares? I mean,
That was the Navy SEAL one, I think.
yeah, that was the command. That was the last figure that came out of that series. But it was just at that time. Look at this. We're talking. Listen to how many different segments are happening at one time.
Yeah.
And it was really chaos, and you couldn't get people to agree on things.
And the reason there's 7 of us down here is because nobody remembers everything. So, we found that
We're
out.
all at that age now.
We found it out on the Zoom calls as we're going through. Dan had this whole, just parade of drawings of product that the designers had created but never saw the light of day. And, half the time, Dan's showing, so, this has your signature on it, what was this about? I don't remember doing that. And then we had to blow up the signature and oh, yeah.
Are you sure that's yours?
But it was a fun call because other people would jump in and remember. I remember that.
Yeah.
Like I remember Alexa Shrimps, and then you jump in, and she's like, okay, now I do remember that.
And then Dan would ask me questions, and I couldn't think of anything. I'd make it up.
So the book's 99.9% true. Well, I think we're at time. Any other last questions?
This is mostly a question for Vinny. You said Hatzenfeld was very resistant to Duke and the Hall of Fame line.
He hated it.
Why do you think he hated it so much?
Because he had this vision of G.I. Joe, of the original G.I. Joe, as what his family
shocks
started.
me.
Yeah, he had this
Tunnel
attachment
vision.
to it. I think a lot of it also was that Larry had this agreement with him. All the presidents of the division had this agreement with Alan, which is, we're going to show you everything that we're doing that's going to hit the mass market, but we're not going to show you the exclusives because they're usually smaller kinds of things. And Alan agreed to that. And this was an exclusive. But Alan felt like this was one that Larry missed because Alan got a call from somebody about this and didn't know we had been doing it. And that's what sort of...
So he felt it was behind his back, and that's why he was hated?
No, it's called micromanaging.
Yeah.
You know?
It made him look like he wasn't connected.
It looked like he wasn't in charge.
Yeah.
And there was always a lot of talk about him. I'm sorry?
Because it was a hit?
Yes.
It was such a hit,
It-
he didn't know about it, that he felt like.
He felt out of the loop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was out of the loop.
He
I mean,
was.
We didn't know it was going to sell like that. We had no idea.
Well, I like Hall of Fame.
Now, Vinny,
Thank you.
before
Thank
we
you very much.
Before we wrap up, Vinny, do you remember Neil Levine shared a story about a paratrooper like jumping on a big? They did a big target in the parking lot. Do you remember that story? Were you part of that?
It could have been that we did, it was connected to the 30th anniversary parachute team that
Okay.
we had hired. It could have been that.
Could have been
Okay.
that, yeah.
I just remember him saying there's a big target
Yeah.
in their parking lot that the guy would
Yeah.
drop down into. So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, there were some things that we wanted to do that never came to be, and part of that was, Alan sets up conflict in the company and then stands back like this. So here we are, everybody had agreed that the G.I. Joe brand was going to go to Cincinnati, and then Don Levine comes up with Timeless Collection, which goes against what we said we were going to do, going to Cincinnati. So he has us put together this whole presentation of what we would do with Timeless Collection. So we built that photograph of raising the flag on Iwo Jima in this big box, and we guessed at a number and said it was $300 with this sculpted terrain. And then we did another one where it was a package which had a paratrooper just about to get up and jump out the plane, but it was a cross-section so you could see him sitting sideways in the box, and we presented that kind of stuff. And I remember presenting it, in Cincinnati, and they knew it was coming, but, I didn't have a choice. And Alan sat there and just let the stew boil. And then afterwards, I had, the whole G.I. Joe team in Cincinnati in the back room ready to cut my throat. And it was only because Kurt was there, because he had been the transplant, that I left that room alive.
I thought it was cool. So
Why did the Cincinnati folks not like it?
Because
it
they
didn't come
were
from him.
bequeathed G.I. Joe as a brand, and they did this.
Yeah.
And everything.
It was their territory.
Yeah, and everything that was ever done before in G.I. Joe sucked compared to that.
the other aspect of that, though, and I'll say this, is that, and it's something that's going to come up. It's a theme that always comes up. We wanted to do toys, and so in Cincinnati, I wanted it to be a toy. Vinny shows up with this, and it's a collectible. You have two separate groups altogether, and then we turned ours into a collectible.
Didn't
To
Cincinnati
go.
make the G.I. Joe Extreme?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yes.
it doesn't
Yes.
exist. I don't know what you're talking about.
It was all Kurt.
I don't know what you're talking
We
about.
we have done the work, and we've dusted all the toys for Kurt's fingerprints, and he was not involved.
Well, we're at time, so I just want to wrap it up. But thank you guys. Appreciate it.